All right, so in GroBoto 3.3, we have added the ability to create truly symmetric meshes, polygon per polygon symmetry. Of course, it's always been possible to create symmetric models in GroBoto, but the meshes were not perfectly symmetric. So a few things to keep in mind when setting up for a symmetric mesh. I've just placed a cone at world center, and you always want to keep things centered in GroBoto's world coordinate system when creating symmetric meshes. And symmetry is always and only across the x-axis, or the YZ plane, if you want to think of it that way. But it's left-right symmetry across x. So there's our cone, and you notice I'm using a level camera, which is nice because it keeps y always vertical, up is always straight up. So here I am placing a cylinder into the scene. And we're going to give you a few tips about how to build things symmetrically in GroBoto. There are a few tools that make it easy. So I'm just playing with this, getting an arbitrary rotation and orientation just so that we can see symmetry in action. And I'm going to right-click, and you note that the object does not have to be selected. This is true of most right-click operations. And I'm using the duplicate and mirror option, and that creates a symmetric mirror image of whatever object I clicked on over there on the left side. Another thing to keep in mind while you're modeling, so let's say you were playing with this. Now we don't have an actual live mirror mode where things automatically adjust on both sides, but after you've made some adjustments, you can simply right-click on the mirrored object over there on either side, on the left in this case, and choose this set object to mirror of selected. And that will resync them, if you will, resync the left and right side objects. All right, so now let's see what happens when we export that as a mesh. I won't get into any details of mesh settings here. We're just going to look at this new setting, symmetric mesh on the x-axis. And I just turned it off so that we can take a look at what the mesh would be without symmetry activated. And as you can see, it's a perfectly fine mesh, and indeed, in a true geometric sense, the mesh is symmetric. The surface is identical on the left and right side, but the structure of the mesh, as you can see when you look at these little areas, is not exactly the same. It's easy to spot these special points like these little triangle here. So, to fix that, we turn on symmetric mesh x-axis and hit the refresh button. And now, as you can see, the structure of the mesh on the left and right side is completely identical. Now this is a feature that you can turn on or off for specific groups when you are generating separate meshes for each GroBoto group. And of course that's often what you will need to do. And even though the meshing algorithm will make any arrangement of objects into a symmetric mesh, we recommend that you don't abuse that notion and that you actually make your model symmetric or your particular group symmetric if you want to use this option. To give you an example of what that's about, I'm going to intentionally rotate this cone off of its symmetric orientation and generate a symmetric mesh. And you can see the algorithm sorted it out, but it created a rather odd mesh, and parts of the cone are just completely missing where the tip across the plane there, it's just completely lost. So you really don't want to do that. And an important aspect of this is that you can sometimes accidentally move or shift an object or not be sure whether it's still has a perfect symmetric orientation. So we have added a right-click menu item that can be used to restore that mirrored orientation. And you see it here, center X and orient for symmetry, which will work differently for different object types. Obviously, something like a cone has to be can't be pointed left or right and still be considered a centered and oriented object. Something like a sphere, it's much easier. So in any case, here's a quick overview of those right-click menu items. Duplicate and mirror is a way of creating a mirrored version of any of your objects. Center X obviously can be useful while building symmetrical models, as can zero object rotation and the send home and zero rotation options. Center and orient for symmetry we just looked at. Set object to mirror of selected is a way of resyncing left and right objects after you've edited one of them. And that's most of what you need to know. There is a detailed PDF document available for download on our site that will give you all the additional information you need. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.